This is Jesus-Centric Leadership. I'm Donna Patton, and I'm here with Pastor Josh. And we have a special guest at the table with us today, and that's Betsy Bowers. Welcome.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Now, I've had the privilege to know you for a while and really value that friendship. But I would love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and, what you're about.
Absolutely. I am a licensed professional counselor in Aurora that works with children, adolescents, and families. I'm also a loving dog mom, and I just geek out on all things communication.
Fantastic.
So we're going to have some fun.
Okay, Betsy, I got to ask, what kind of dogs?
I have a pit bull mix and a lab mix.
I'm
So
sure
both
your
mutts.
pit bull is amazing, but I'm a lab lover, so those labs, they're like people.
They are, and they hug like people.
Oh, yeah, they
You don't
do.
want to train that out of them.
No, I have a German short hair lab mix. That's a whole nother day we could talk about that.
I believe it.
Yeah, anxiety. Talk about anxiety.
Indeed,
Wow.
indeed.
All right, so you're here with us today. We've asked you to join us to talk a little bit about dealing with difficult people. And the truth is, I think Pastor Josh brought you in so he could learn how to deal with me. I'm not sure. But it's quite the topic. What defines a difficult person?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it goes back to me, what I think is a difficult person. Because what you find, I think we see this, right, in how we work together, that sometimes, you find this person difficult, and I, think they're the joy to work with and the joy to be around. And so I think it is very much...
Wait. We don't find anybody at
No,
church
never.
difficult.
Never.
These could be people in our neighborhood that we...
Yes, definitely. That's exactly what I mean. Or people on social media, yeah. No, it really is, so that my wiring and my experience make it hard to deal with someone. I mean, do you agree, disagree? What do you think about it?
I definitely think so. Your personality dynamics and the way that that's kind of displayed in your behavior is going to determine your perspective on people that are different from you. And sometimes different doesn't equal peaceful.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting you say that. Yelling was not a good thing for me. And so if somebody is very verbally loud or expressive, I do find them a little difficult because to me, that sets off, oh my goodness, this is going to go a bad direction and I'm going to have to manage it and I'm going to have to, there's a lot of going to have to's.
Like you're going to have to contain it somehow.
Right. But that's not our responsibility or our role as we deal with difficult people, right?
Yeah, it's not our job to manage other people's behavior. Now, we can be aware of certain things and we can try to, at times, anticipate. But again, is that going to take you away from the current moment, the presence that you can connect with that other person and get something done if you're preoccupied with what could happen?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and I guess, I'll jump to you, Betsy, if you had, one piece of advice, and I can go first if you need a moment to think about it, but one, what the biggest piece of advice you'd say for how we deal with difficult people? So somebody's got me kind of spinning and riled up, and they're difficult for me. What do I do?
Oh, great. First off, I don't want to sound too Pollyanna with this, but I think the people that we have difficulty communicating with can be really great teachers for us. I don't like thinking about that experientially, but in my past, that's been true. So I would say the kind of core tenet I would go back to is maintaining curiosity and openness towards the other person. If you're able to do that, then you can be in a stance of more peacefulness than if you're just kind of like, wow, I'm just ready for them to stop talking. I would like them to wrap it up.
So you're actually asking somebody like me to not step back from somebody who's difficult, but to step into.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
So yeah, it looks different for different people, and it depends on, I think, the kind of things it brings up in you. You're not always going to want to lean into what the hard thing is. You're not always going to have the bandwidth to do that. But I think it could be as simple as unclenching your jaw and taking the tongue off the roof of your mouth and really recognizing that this is not a state where you're threatened. This is just a moment where there's a bit of disorganization, there's some disorder, and maybe there's something to work with here rather than something to move away from.
Yeah, I like that, because in the pause, we can give the moment what it needs to be able to move forward, rather than feeling like, A, I have to fix it, or B, I'm going to fight.
Right.
I'm going to go fast and hard the other way.
And there's something to be said for taking a break and regulating yourself and coming back. That I think has its place, but that's different than walking away, hightailing it out and being done.
Correct. Which is, like you brought up, that's my sometimes go-to of, man, I don't know if I have the bandwidth for that individual right now. I might go to one of my go-tos. Yeah. But I love that we have something we can learn in the difficult, right? Pastor, what were you going to share us?
Yeah, so I think like there's a phrase like walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, which I actually kind of don't like, because you can't, right? I can't actually put on your shoes and know what you're going through. But it brings up an interesting idea, like this idea of the fundamental attribution error. And kind of what that teaches is that I have a tendency to overestimate like personal characteristics, that's the problem with someone else. So like, let's use anger. So if somebody's anger, what I usually jump to is, well, they're an angry person. But see, I don't do the same thing with myself.
Label them.
Yeah, and label them. But I don't do the same thing with myself. Like if I'm angry, right, I don't usually label myself as an angry person.
I'm justified.
Yeah.
I'm just expressing myself. Let me have my own opinion.
Yeah. And so we that's the fundamental attribution error, that I blame you for who you are. I blame the things that are going on in my life for my problems. And so like, if we take anger into that, if I understand that there might be something going on in their life that's causing them to be angry, I can see them as a person that's having a struggle based as a bad person. Because I think I generally have empathy towards somebody who's going through something. I put distance between myself and somebody that's a bad person, right? And I think mostly, again, if we're all created in the image of God, we are, just FYI. If we're all sinful, we are, then that's someone who Jesus died, who he loves, who he has forgiven, who he's invited to be in community. And so my task is to kind of, to your point, understand where they're at and be curious about it as opposed to distance.
Right.
So we're in May of 2024 that this is being recorded. We have an election coming up. We're definitely not going to ask you where you stand on that, Betsy, so you're welcome. But we have a lot of things that's really fueling angst in people that may make them feel more difficult. So how do we put into practice what Pastor's saying of, we aren't our anger, we aren't our difficult, right?
Yeah, we aren't our emotion.
Right. And how do we love them well?
I think that is a key question that you can walk through every day wondering about.
How do I do better loving people?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think that some of the pieces that are important there are really creating space in yourself, reminding yourself that you've got difficult parts. I love the work of Richard Schwartz. He is the creator, the guru of the internal family systems model. And he talks about how we have all of these pieces and parts within us that have different thoughts, emotions, sometimes different personalities. Now, I'm not talking about dissociative identity disorder or anything like that, but even when we talk about ourselves or a situation to another person, we're saying, I have a part of me that's like this. Mm-hmm. And so if we can do that with ourselves, and we can do that with other people, if we're encountering them as angry or frustrated or short, that's a part of them. That is not the whole of them. Reminding ourselves that in that snapshot, in that brief instance when we are encountering someone, it's a bit of them. Just like I have an hour a week with my clients and they've got all the other hours of the week to do their lives, I'm only seeing a snapshot. We're only seeing a snapshot of somebody that for whatever reason is coming forward in that moment.
And this may be a moment, or it may be a fabric that
it might be a pattern
woven through their life.
Yes, it's true. And it's not bad to be mindful of that pattern. And I think living in community, dealing with difficult people, there are places and times for gentle, loving confrontation about these kind of patterns. If it's something that's bringing up a persistent state of disorganization, disorder, distress, then truly to have that conversation with someone gives them the opportunity to make an adjustment. And we would want that opportunity given to ourselves. I mean, I certainly sit with myself and try to think about things I could have done different. Maybe that's anxiety a little bit, but nonetheless, it happens. If we offer that opportunity to other people, then I think we're going to create a better environment for holistic communication and presence.
And that doesn't always have to be in a negative manner.
Absolutely not.
I had a friend of mine who today posted that, they are seeing that this negative piece is really having some consequences. And so they put it out there. I'm working on this. I just want you guys to know I'm working on this. And the feedback was so refreshing. People were like, yay, go you. Like, I'm behind you. You can do this. And I was like, oh, that was a beautiful way for the community to come around this individual and say, they didn't go, yeah, you're right, change, right? They were like, no, you're okay, and we love you.
Yeah, and there's a way in which I try to do this. I definitely don't do it perfectly, but when I'll have a client sometimes show me something that's a little bit uncomfortable with them, or a part of them that's getting a little reactive, I'll be like, thank you for your honesty.
Yeah.
I do appreciate you being willing to show that to me, even if I may not like all of the ways it comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think though the key in that is we've got to say that expectation out loud.
Absolutely.
Like, and I know that's simple, but I think sometimes we miss it. I think we just think that, well, because I kind of shut down when they get angry, like they should know that their anger bothers me. But until we actually say that out loud and set that expectation, they might not have any clue about it.
Absolutely. I think that making something that might be embedded, really intentional and direct, is so key across the board in communication, whether you're dealing with your spouse or a sibling or a close friend. Like, don't assume that they understand where your thinking is at.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask for grace as I say this, because I'm just going to think out loud.
Yeah,
We don't have a
That's
script.
what we're doing,
We are literally just talking. But I think of Thomas. Was he Jesus's difficult one, right? Because he was like, well, I need to see the marks, and here, like, he's right there. Are you kidding me? And the excitement, and he's like a buzzkill, but Jesus loved him even in that difficult moment, because he knew that was going to help him.
And the fact that that's included in the canon of Scripture shows us that there are going to be Thomases in all of our situations. There's going to be someone that kind of goes against whatever the rhythm is in the moment for whatever reason.
Yeah, I love how you said that. That's going to go against the way the rhythm is in the moment. Yeah. And we bristle and we step back instead of just loving.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think difficult people are a chance for us to understand about ourselves. Like, I mean, the reality of something bothers me. Why does it bother me, right? There's something going on there. But then I think also with dealing with difficult people, it does come to a place where I think we need to set boundaries, right? To use, Cloud and Townsend, they wrote a famous book on boundaries, right? To use that we do have to set a boundary. Like, I mean, we're talking about anger, embodiment of anger, like going over the top, right? At some point we do have to tell the person, hey, that bothers me. When you do that, I'm just going to step away.
Right.
We can renew our friendship, but I'm not going to let you get angry at me. I'm going to walk away if it happens.
And setting that expectation and letting them know that this is what this looks like when I see this.
Yeah.
When I see this, the action I'm going to take is this.
Yes.
And making that clear, because that is something that will, in a way, teach them, like, there is a consequence to my behavior. And I'm not saying we're just walking around giving everybody consequences or things like that, but we all need that kind of limit. Everybody needs it all the time. And limiting someone's influence on ourselves and others can be very important.
Yeah, and I think the hard thing, I think, for people with boundaries is I think I'm a Christian, I'm supposed to be nice, I'm supposed to be loving, I'm supposed to be kind, and I think by allowing people, by enablement of their behavior, we're allowing them to persist in something that's bad, as opposed to setting the boundary and then following, and then I've got to follow through. Like if somebody gets angry at me and I've said that I'm going to walk away and I just sit there and take it that time, I'm actually empowering them because they get results. They're doing it because they get results. And so when I set boundaries, I have to follow through with them.
And it's a both and. I can love you and I can have a boundary that is also loving.
Correct.
It's not always a negative, it's a positive too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You have an instance where what you're paying attention to or what you're devoting energy to will grow. And so, like you were saying, Pastor Josh, if I allow someone to continue to treat me a certain way and I don't set any limits, I don't actually follow through with what I'm saying, I am teaching them that it's okay to continue to do that. And that's not only bad for that relationship, that's bad in other areas. And it's loving to call someone out in a gracious, kind way when there's something going wrong that pushes other people away and hurts them.
Yeah, but to turn the tables back on me, it's easy for us to talk about others. True. But when somebody points that out in me, it's hard. It's humbling. I'm afraid you're going to reject me. All those things, right? So as we go back to something that you said, creating space for my difficult parts. So I have to understand those to be able to hear when there's a boundary put on me too. How do we find our difficult parts and learn to live with them?
Beautiful question.
Because this side of heaven, there's some I'm not going to get rid of.
Yeah, that's true. Well, the good thing is they do pop up like pretty regularly.
Not mine.
And
every day.
Yes, and our vision and this view of the consequences of those things are very real. And I think there's the temptation always of the avoidance, or there's leaning into what is our instinct to avoid. So what Jordan Peterson talks about this throughout his work, the avoidance of what we are called to be doing is abdication of responsibility. What we're called is to greater responsibility. So if my instinct is to avoid something, whether it's a sad part or a really angry part of myself, or just a part that gets really obsessive, that can be really negative. If I'm leaning into it more and kind of like, where did that come from? What is that part trying to do for me? If I almost think about having a conversation with that part, oftentimes in my experience and with others, I think if you lean into that and try to understand it, it kind of diffuses.
Okay, give us an example.
So okay, I got one, I think. So I have this part of me that is really perfectionistic and really annoying. And it leads me to procrastinate. And so I could easily just ignore the fact that I have a problem with this. Or I could lean into it and be like, okay, what's really driving this need to be perfectionistic, and honestly get behind on stuff I need to get done at work, not just for myself, but for a business, for other people, for my clients. And there's detrimental stuff to that. But if I lean into it and really try to ask myself, like, is this really the way that I see myself in the world? I really find like, no, it's but a tiny piece of my identity. This part of my work is a responsibility. It's something I'm called to do, but it's not a measure of my worth. It's not a measure of how well I am showing up in every aspect of my life. Does that make sense?
Yes, because we find our worth
in Jesus.
Yeah, and which sounds easy, but in the middle of my struggle with perfectionism, Pastor, how do I go back to this is not my worth? Because that Jesus answer sounds simple, but it's really hard to get to sometimes.
Right, and I think it is that it's a reminding yourself on a regular basis where it comes from, right? We need to know portions of Scripture that we can say to ourselves when we're challenging ourselves. Yeah, and I do want to go back to your question. I think it was great. Like, how do we learn those difficult parts of us? And I think, great example with working through, but for some of us, we don't always even know what our difficult parts are. And so how do we create a safe place for others to share what are difficult places? Like I think about it, just even this last Sunday, I had a member come up and said, Pastor, you should talk about Jesus like this. And my response wasn't, and it should have been, well, thank you. I didn't realize that I wasn't sharing that part of Jesus, but my response was to kind of defend myself where I'm at. And I think even like when we're with people, how do we create a safe place so that you can walk in, Donna, and say, you're struggling with this, and say it nicely, but get your act together. And then when I hear that, be okay with that, because that's not all of who I am, and it's not how Jesus loves me, but I've got to let people tell me where I can do better, or else I don't grow.
Yeah, but isn't a part of that relationship? Because not everybody really has permission to speak that into my life. And it takes time, and it takes trust, and it takes to allow somebody to speak into the growth parts of me.
Absolutely. No, I think so. There's a certain way in which we have to be living alongside each other in a particular way to be willing to receive difficult information.
Yeah, but if you're not, I guess I would say as a leader, if you're not receiving difficult information from some people, it means that you've created an environment where they can't do that.
Yes, and I think, I can't remember who said it, but I want to have people around me that love me but don't always like me and can speak that truth. And I've had people that have done that. They've been like, girlfriend, you gotta move forward, or you're coming out of the space of critical spirit, and critical spirit is my red flag that I'm not in a good space. So I can walk in and my chair's in the wrong place, and I can just go on stuff, and that's my red flag, because I've had people who have loved me enough to say, hey, when you get critical, I've noticed that's not good.
And even though the red flag can be seen as a negative thing, I think that it's also an indicator of like, hey, pay attention here.
Yes.
There's like some energy, there's some need that needs to be attended to in order for us to get to the other side of this.
Right, because they've loved me enough to tell me that, that kind of, sometimes I will become a difficult person if I stay there very long, but if I can identify it, because I have that knowledge, I can step out of it a little bit quicker. I think I've even said that to you, like, I'm really critical today. I don't know that today is a good day for us to discuss this, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm not seeing the world as half full. I'm seeing things as half empty.
Yeah, and again, to close it up, again, I think our value in that is when things are challenging, we go back to this is how I'm feeling or how I'm acting or how I'm behaving, but it's not who I am. It's not the sum total of who I am, and it's not the love that I have in Jesus.
Great. Some great discussion today. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next episode of Jesus-Centric Leadership.